Your plaintiff side employment, that can mean a lot of things. Maybe you do all of them, but is there a specific niche within the niche that you take care of, or do you sort of do anything plaintiff side?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And we've narrowed it down. So to answer your question, no, we don't do it all. We tried to for a while, but as maybe this is true of other practice areas as well. But, within employment law, even plaintiff side, there are, right, you could do nothing but wage and hour. You could, focus on non-competes. You could, just do discrimination cases. So we represent individuals. So we don't do collective or class actions. We tried that for a while and realized that, it just wasn't our wheelhouse. And also, we can kind of get into this a little bit more, but in terms of the marketing, it's a different pain point for people when you're talking to individuals versus, a class.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm Jonathan Hawkins, your host. Really excited about this week's guest. This week we have Tom Spiggle, who is a plaintiff side employment lawyer out of Virginia, who is pretty prolific in his marketing efforts, and I'm very impressed. We're going to get into all the stuff he does and how he sort of layered that on. I really want to dig into that. But Tom, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and where you
absolutely. I appreciate it, Jonathan. This is gonna be some fun. Like you said, I plaintiff side employment attorney. We are out of Alexandria, Virginia, so right outside of Washington, D.C., and we represent folks primarily in the DMV, so Maryland, D.C., Virginia. We do take some cases in North Carolina, Texas, and North Carolina, which is where we have folks barred, but our primary hub is here in the DMV.
So how many people are at your firm? How many attorneys, how many staff, how many offices?
Yeah, so we have eight attorneys, people total. We only have, like we said, we operate in a number of areas, but we only have one brick and mortar location, which is in Alexandria. But, as I think with a lot of firms these days, we got people all over, not only in the States, but, working, Mexico, South Africa, kind of the remote workers. So that's sort of our stats.
That's a big operation. I want to hear the evolution. But so your plaintiff side employment, that can mean a lot of things. Maybe you do all of them. But is there a specific niche within the niche that you take care of, or do you sort of do anything plaintiff side?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and we've narrowed it down. So to answer your question, no, we don't do it all. We tried to for a while, but as maybe this is true of other practice areas as well. But within employment law, even plaintiff side, there are, right, you could do nothing but wage and hour. You could, focus on non-competes. You could, just do discrimination cases. So we represent individuals. So we don't do collective or class actions. We tried that for a while and realized that, it just wasn't our wheelhouse. And also, we can kind of get into this a little bit more. But in terms of the marketing, it's a different pain point for people when you're talking to individuals versus, a class. So we only represent individuals. And within that, we do the range of services. So whether it's a discrimination matter or, we're occasionally on the other side of the V. So we'll represent, folks in a defensive action, like somebody getting sued for non-compete violation. Occasionally breach of contract will come up. So that's sort of our wheelhouse.
So I know you started out in criminal law. How did you, number one, tell us what you began doing, and then how did you move from that into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I actually started out in civil. I graduated from Georgetown in 2001 and then went back to North Carolina, where I'm from, and worked with a sort of a mid-sized firm called Tharrington Smith down there in Raleigh, North Carolina, and was in their education practice. So we represented school boards in all manner of but basically we were their, outside general counsel. So as part of that, we handled a fair amount of litigation, including employment litigation. So that's how I got my first taste in it, was actually on defense side, which was a little bit interesting because a lot of us, in education, in that field, we're sort of bleeding hearts and, want to make the system better. And then we realize that, well, we're firing people, we're suspending, if there was a student suspension appeal, we're coming in there to try to kick that poor student out. It was good work. I don't mean to shortchange it, but it was definitely management side. But that's where I got my first taste of it. I actually didn't take any of those classes in law school, but loved the intellectual challenge of it. Loved that people on both sides took it very seriously, right? And it wasn't just kind of a business dispute getting resolved in the courts. People really took these matters personally. So I love that. So I did that for about 2 years. My now wife and I, we met in law school, and she stayed in DC. And then so we got engaged. And I'm like, well, somebody's got to move. And she's from Connecticut, and she said, well, I'm not moving any further south than right here. So back I went to DC and ended up clerking in DC Superior Court for Jeb Boasberg. He's now the chief judge of the DC Federal Court, just a really impressive guy. And he was, a hot shot from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I told him I wanted to learn how to try cases because I had been doing, litigation, as a very junior associate, but a few depositions here or there. But a lot of the folks that I worked with didn't try a lot of cases. Maybe they tried one or two in their entire career. And I wanted to have more notches on my belt than that. So he was the one who's like, well, you should go to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Well, he said, you should go criminal side, because you're going to get more trial experience. And I'm like, so he said, I'm happy to, if you wanted to do the U.S. Attorney's Office, I'm happy to support you. And so I applied out of the clerkship and got all the way to the final interview and did not get it. Went to work because I didn't have much of a criminal background. So I went to work for a white collar boutique in DC that those guys have all retired. It's no longer in existence. It was called Janice Schulke and Wexler. And they were it's an interesting group of folks because they were all former AUSAs. They had come up during the Watergate era. And then they opened their shop before kind of white collar defense was considered by the big firms to be not classy enough to do it. So a lot of the big firms didn't do white collar defense. And it really started to boom after the Watergate era. So they really hit that wave just right. And it was a great 2 years. I was the only associate there. They only had one associate at the time, and basically because they would represent mostly individuals. So, their buddies, former colleagues at the U.S., many of them at the U.S. Attorney's Office were at these big firms. The big firms would take the companies and represent them and send these guys like, the CFO. Sometimes they had criminal exposure, and sometimes it was just a matter of kind of walking them through the grand jury. But it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, and then reapplied to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that's how I ended up there. And then, there for a number of years, and really it was a great job, enjoyed that, but I sort of had an itch to start my own practice, and finally wore my wife down enough to where she said, she was pregnant with our third, and she said, okay, you got 9 months to make this work. I'm like, okay. Uh-oh. Well, it only took me about, 9 years, but it was too late. The seal had been broken, and I was off to the races.
U.S. Attorney's Office won't have me back. I have to do it.
That's right.
So that's cool. So what was the itch? Why did you want to start your own firm? Are you sort of an entrepreneur at heart? I've followed you on LinkedIn. I've looked at your website. I've seen a lot of the stuff you're doing. You got a podcast. We'll talk about all that. So it seems to me that you sort of have this in you, but maybe it's something you developed later.
Yeah. It's interesting. I really, I do think I have some entrepreneurial tendencies, but I was not one of those kids who was like selling bubble gum to their classmates, in elementary school, and always had I was not that guy. That said, my father, now retired, but he was a doctor, solo practitioner. So without thinking about it, I think I did sort of absorb some of that and just saw how he lived his life and what that was like. And it really was when I was clerking. This was in 2003. This is back when blogs were just becoming a thing. And I'm sure you probably have heard of her, but Carolyn Elephant had a blog called My Shingle, and she was writing about her experience. And then she had just started. I think she was a couple of years out, and I was just in a swoon. I mean, I just read that. And I'm like, that was what really lit the fire for me and got me thinking about it. And once that started, it was like, like a mind virus. I couldn't get rid of it. So that was the impetus.
So you decided to start your own firm. Did you decide at that time you're going to do plaintiff side employment, or tell us about sort of picking that, or what did you start out with and how did you end up in your niche now?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of shudder at what I didn't know when I started. I can't even remember, frankly, what I thought I was going to do. I mean, I remember talking to my wife and be like, hey, look, all I got to do is bill this many hours at this rate. I'll easily be able to replace my salary at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think that was about my level of sophistication with it.
Yeah,
So
I have had a very similar conversation. I know that conversation.
And the math didn't quite work out, not immediately anyway. But so I, when I started, I was all over the map. I mean, I did want to do litigation, and I did a fair amount of that. I still wanted to do plaintiff side. So I've always had that interest. And in fact, even when I was working at these, the criminal defense side firm, I did a number of pro bono. I was involved with the National Employment Lawyers Association, which is the big, federal plaintiff side bar, and also the local chapter, and was with a group that, I think it's been absorbed by the Committee for Civil Rights, but it used to be they did pro bono work. They had a clinic, and they did pro bono work for folks with employment issues, and the ones that had legs, like actual need to be filed, they would send them out to folks to do. And so I took one of those cases, which was my first, even while I was at Janice Schulke and Wexler. So I had that interest, but I remember I did one will, and I think I probably made about $5.13 an hour as I realized, I had no idea what I was doing when it came to like trust and states, and I had to take the CLEs and all that. But pretty quickly from there, I, focused on litigation. I did some criminal defense, got on the CJA panels in DC and Virginia, and then started taking other related civil litigation. I was interested in plaintiff side and started kind of holding myself out for that, and started to get a fair number of referrals. And I quickly realized that why I was getting these referrals, and that's because Virginia, it's gotten better. It's still not great, but it was not a great place. It was a rocky jurisdiction to do plaintiff side work. So people were sending me these cases. I'm like, oh, I must be the man. then I got, slapped down on summary judgment a couple of times. I'm like, okay, this is why they're sending me these cases. But so I had sort of that mix of cases I was doing. And then I sort of backed into hiring people. For when I started, it was just me. I had a laptop with a cracked screen, so I had to get an external monitor so I could see it, and a little bit of office furniture, but that was it. I was attorney, paralegal, chief bottle washer, you name it. And this was in 2009, 2010, when the economy was in the tank. Mm-hmm. And I had a case that I got that was a big federal civil litigation in the Eastern District of Virginia that was like hot and heavy. And I had co-counsel, who's actually one of my former Georgetown professors, co-counsel. And we were like, we need somebody. He didn't have a big shop either. And we're like, we need some help. And I put an ad. I'm like, I was just looking for a law clerk to help me go through the documents. And I got so many borrowed attorneys who were just desperate for work. So I I hired one or two just kind of on a part-time basis, and then quickly realized what law firms have been, realized for the past 1,000 years, which is, hey, if I can pay you X and bill you out at, 3X, this is not a bad deal. So I did have some associates, but it was, when you don't have a niche, when you don't really, I was just sort of feeling my way along. It was hard, it was definitely, long hours. I wasn't particularly efficient. And I started following a guy named Lee Rosen, who you may have heard of. Mm. And this was back when he still owned his firm, and he was just getting into the coaching business. And he just getting to the power of marketing. He had this blog, which he would just, post his thoughts on law firm management. And every morning I would just devour that thing. And it was like, you talk about good marketing. It was like he was in my head, it was like he was like, he would write about things that I would think it only happened to me. And it was like so comforting to read it and be like, oh, okay, this is not just me, and my tale of woe. This is like a kind of thing. So I called him, and it's interesting. I knew of his firm when I was in Raleigh because that's where his firm was. So I knew of him, but I'd never met him. So I called him, and I think he just started doing individual coaching, and I hired him as a coach. And he was fantastic. But one of the first things he said was just like, you got to pick a niche. He's like, I don't care which one it is, but pick one area that you want to focus on. And I'm like, okay, I want to do plaintiff side employment. And it was scary, I remember, because I was doing a good bit of plaintiff side work then. It was probably 50, 60% of my revenue, but the other cases were 30 to 40 of it. So to let go of that and to kind of, just jump into that. And then he said, you got to write a book. He said, I don't care what the book says. It's got to have a good title and a good cover. You just wanted to get SEO and to get press coverage. So that's what I did. And I just ran his program straight down the middle, and he was exactly right.
So let's pause on that. So a couple of things you said, a lot of lawyers, not all of them, but that go out on their own, they're like you got 9 months to start making it work. So you're like, right. I'm going to do anything and everything just to get money in the door. And, it's scary and you want the money, and that's good. But then you quickly realize how inefficient it is when you're doing a will here, and then you're doing a dispossessory over here, and then you're doing a whatever over there. And so, that's a common experience. And the other thing I'll say, big believer in the niche practice is sort of like almost by removal of the other things. You slowly start removing things. And then, I was part of Lee's program, I don't know, a few years ago. You were there in the beginning, but I don't think he had sold his firm yet. It was close around that time though, but he was traveling the world. I thought that was pretty cool. But so I was going to ask you, your marketing stack, you were doing a lot of cool stuff, and we're going to go through all of it. So I guess the first thing is, was it Lee Rosen that helped you figure that out or started you down the path? How did I guess, was the book really the first thing you did?
Oh, wow. This is one of the things I wish I had done. I wish I'd kept a journal, just and I'm not a great journaler. I know some people are. I wish I had, because I can't remember. I think I was doing some marketing. I knew I had a website. So, I was always interested in marketing, and I think I was doing some writing, some blogs, but, really picking the niche is what helped me start to focus on that. But Lee was certainly the big impetus. He was the one. I know I had been doing some because, when it came time to write the book, he was like, well, just take all of your blogs. And that's, that's the first bit of it. And that's what I did. So I collected all these blog posts, and that was, so I had already been doing that, but he was the one who, just what he did. He was like, pick your niche, figure out what people's pain points are, which because they're coming into your office and they're telling you what their pain points are, like what keeps them up at night, and then write to them. Like, don't write to another lawyer, which I think would be fine if you've got an appellate practice. But if you're B2C and you're trying to get these clients to call you, write to their pain points. And so he was probably the big impetus behind that. And I remember, he kept having to kind of redirect me, like I would come to him with some great idea and he'd be like, no, just back to employment law, just keep writing, keep pushing in that area. Because I remember I had an attorney who did special education work, and I'm like, well, this is related. So we'll start writing about, students and all that. And he was like, no, he's like, you're just going to confuse Google, just stay in your lane. So he was the big impetus for it.
Okay. So you've written 2 books now. I know you've got a new one that's out, and I want to hear about, you mentioned a little bit about the first one. So you took some blog posts. I want to hear about your process and how you did it, how long it took you, what resources you went to employ in terms of, the cover design, all that kind of stuff, and compare that first go around with the book to what you did this last go around.
Yeah. So the first time, again, I relied on Lee quite a bit. I obviously wrote the book myself, and I just, like I said, I, took those, however many blog posts I had, and that was probably the first half of it. And then I would just sit, after we gotten the kids down to bed, they got that golden hour, maybe hour and a half. And I would just sit on the couch. We'd have our, TV show on, and I would just write. And I didn't try to make a narrative. I just kind of just started as if I were speaking to someone who was with me in a consult. And I realized like when you write that way, like, and you're not writing a law review article or something like that, like for me at least, I imagine probably for most folks who do what we do, it comes pretty quick. You have a lot. I mean, there's a lot, I was surprised, because there was a lot I had to say about it. And so it probably took me 10 months, maybe a year to finally get all the material down. And then I hired a writer who was a lawyer her name is Kristen Walensky. She's still out there. She does great work. And again, Lee pointed me to her, and I just was like, here's this, manuscript, like turn it into like chapters and headings and all that. Because that was another thing that he was the one that really kind of turned me on to the idea of delegation, in those areas where, like, because he talked about, like, because he was obviously a prolific writer, and he would say for himself that for his blog posts, he would often get stuck on he'd get the thing written, he'd get 90% the way there, but he'd get stuck on the headings and the graphics and all that. And he quickly realized, like, look, if I can just do the writing and then send it to somebody who was Kristen and say, put in the heading, put in the graphics, and then post it for me, like, then things started to move for him. And so that was one big thing up. So she turned it into, a usable manuscript, and which went through many iterations after that. I mean, anybody who's written a book, if this happened to me the second time, like, almost like you invariably, I don't care how many times you read it, you'll still find a typo somewhere. And, you're like, then I get paranoid. I'm like, there are typos everywhere. Do I need to go back through this whole thing again?
And they're highlighted and they're flashing and everybody's going to see it, right?
Exactly right. Nobody else, right? So nobody else notices, but you notice, right? Yeah. So we got a cover designer off of, I believe it was off Upwork, which is you may have used, but it's a platform you go and you can post for anything. I've gotten so much help off of Upwork, but that's where I went, and I found a cover designer who designed the cover for us. And then I used a company that has since been bought by Google. I think it is now, if not completely, or at least part of their Kindle Direct program. But this company was called CreateSpace, and they would like, actually at the time they would even do the cover and all that, but I already had that done. But they would do all the stuff that I didn't realize. Like, you feel like the hardest part is writing the book, and it is a hard part, but like, you're like, okay, it's done. Typers are mostly out of it. You hand off to somebody and they're like, well, what kind of page stock do you want? How big do you want the book to be? What kind of font do you want? And I'm like, I just do a book. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So they worked with me on that to kind of get those details done. And then they put it up on up on Amazon and did all the hard copies. So that's how I got the first one done.
And how did you use it to market? Do you have it on your website? Obviously, If a client comes in, you just hand them a copy.
Yes.
How did you employ it?
Yeah. Certainly any kind of networking stuff that I did, I would send people a book afterwards. I'm sure a good many of them end up in the trash or recycling, but it's harder to throw away a book than it is a business card. So I used it that way. But the other pro tip, and again, I go back to Lee, he was the one he's like, you got to get somebody, a PR agent. He's like, writing the book is only half of it. You got to get somebody out there to push it for you. So I did. I hired a PR person who's fantastic. She's still out there. Her name is Allison Beckwith. She's in Maryland, former press person who now does PR stuff. And she was just phenomenal. She really, part of it was certainly her work. And part of it was, I'd picked a good topic. There weren't many men. There weren't many books out at all, but there certainly weren't many men writing about pregnancy discrimination. So it was just sort of an interesting hook for reporters. And, this, because going back to what Lee said, he's like, you want a book with a good title, and a nice cover, because he's like, press people want somebody with authority, and they want to be able to say, Tom Spiggle, author of whatever. And he's like, they're probably not going to read your book. They just want, they've got stories they got to produce. They've got to find experts. And he says, once you find one or two, like, you'll be in their Rolodex, and they'll come back to you for other stories, which turned out to be exactly right. So I ended up, I don't know if the book necessarily, but I got quoted in the New York Times, got me on CNN. Like, it got me just a lot of press, which then resulted in a lot of backlinks to the website. And then, another thing that I did was, so I'd taken half the first half of the book off my current writings. The second half of the book, I took them from the book and put them back on my website. So again, another tip from Lee, he's like, don't be precious about what you write. Nobody's reading it so closely that they're going to notice you have it in 8 different places. So, just kind of repurpose it. So that's what I did.
That's cool. So you got the book, you're getting in the media. How did you start to add to your stack? I know I'll list some of the things I know you do now. So you got your email newsletter, you've got a podcast, maybe you have more than one. You've got, you're on social media. You probably do some other stuff too. So take us through your stack, and then how did you begin to layer that on? Because you can't do it all at once. That's the other thing.
Exactly right.
Somebody comes out, they look at you and your website and they're like, holy crap, there's no way I'm ever going to be like Tom and be able to do that. But, it doesn't happen overnight, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think for me, I've always been a little bit of a frustrated law professor, right? I like to write, I like to teach. And so I don't know if compulsively is the right word, but I just did that naturally. I was like writing. So as to your question, it really started with the website. So that for a long time, that was my main game. That and just, shoe leather networking. That was a big piece of it too for me in the beginning. But in terms of like digital marketing, it was just, writing stuff on the website, constantly adding, obviously the game has changed quite a bit, but back in the day, it was blogging, right? That was the thing. And so just regularly get out there and blogging was a big piece of it. And then constantly trying to iterate on the website to provide things that would be useful to our potential clients. So for instance, one of the things I did again through Upwork was I hired, I not developed in the sense of the back end, but I'm like, okay, I want to figure out a calculator that somebody can use to get a kind of a broad stroke look at what the damages in their case might be. And so I went on Upwork and I was like, hey, I didn't even know what to call it this time. I'm looking for somebody to help me with a calculator. And I found this dude in India who did it for me for like $500. And I bet that thing, don't know for certain, but I would be not surprised if that didn't generate many 6 figures in revenue because, right, you put the calculator on the website and then you do the email drip, right? Because people got to put in their email to you get access to the calendar, which is the way I did it. And then I just had this drip campaign follow-up email that I used. And so it was things like that. So it really started with the website as the anchor. And then the other things really flowed from that. And I think to your point, like if you can get some traction in one area, then you get the revenue and the space to try other things like podcasts and social media. And because the trick is always like, how much of it do you want to do yourself and how much do you want to hire somebody to do it? Like that was kind of the anchor, and then everything else flowed from that.
So tell me about your podcast. Let's plug it. What's the name? How often do you publish? Who's it geared towards?
So I've had a couple of podcasts. I did one called Parents at Work, which again was designed, because one of our niches within our niche is representing like pregnancy discrimination, caregiver discrimination. And so I wanted, and this is true of at least my second layer of marketing, is trying to stay in front of my audience before they need me, right? Because I think this is true for plaintiff side in particular. When somebody has the accident, when somebody gets fired, they're out there looking for the attorney, but and you should be looking for those people, of course, but those are the most expensive people to get, right? They don't know you. You've got to develop, the trust and like you piece before they're even going to pick up the phone. So the objective was to try to be in front of people, and most people have better things to do than worry about whatever your specific area of law is, right? Like my ideal clients are not out there thinking, wow, what's the Fourth Circuit doing on Title VII discrimination cases these days? They've got other things. So I wanted to be in front of them in a different way. So we started out with just me, and then it was with another attorney, Lori Mahalik-Levin, fantastic. And she had her own, I'm a blank on the name of it, but her own e-course for attorneys mostly who had a child and were returning to work and kind of how to navigate that path. Oh man, I'm blanking on. But anyway, so she and I co-hosted it, and we would interview people in various, like in accounting and legal and tech, who had kids, and like basically how are you making this work? So I did that for a while, and this is just part of my personality. I'll kind of start things and get tired of them, and so I did that for about a year. And I just started to to kind of lose my mojo, even though I thought it was a great podcast and I love working with Lori, but I'm like, Lori, do you want to just take this and run with it? And she's like, sure. So now she and her husband do Parents at Work. And then it was a while, it was probably another, maybe year, another 2 years before I started another podcast. And it started out called I Got Fired, again, toward my target audience. And the subject matter was what you might expect. I mean, talk about really more narrow employment law issues. And that was more towards, people who've got that burning need. We then renamed it the Spiggle Law Podcast because I wanted to broaden out some of the things I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to have to just be in that lane. So that's what I do now. I do a mix of, kind of employment law topics and law firm management issues. I'm not an expert at it, but I'm very interested in AI. So some discussions about AI in the legal field. So that's the podcast now.
That's cool.
And we do it weekly.
Okay. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So there's another thing that I think is pretty cool just from looking at your website, and I came across something that's called the Legal Leverage Program, and it has a trademark symbol on it.
Yeah.
So number one, it's intriguing and enticing. I was like, what is that? So
yeah.
Tell me about that, and what is it? And I like that you got the trademark on it.
Yeah. So this was a video course that I first developed 3 or 4 years ago. And we've since reshot it at least one time, but it is basically how describing to a layperson or somebody who's trying to go it on their own, or at least doing their own research, like how an expert would evaluate their case, right? Because there are just certain steps that we take and anybody in my field takes when evaluating a case. And so the idea, the legal leverage was, using the legal system to apply force to the lever to move your employer or to reach your objective. And that leverage changes depending on where you are in the process and how far and how many resources you're willing to put into it. So I really start out with the first module is on damages, right? Because, it's interesting, and you may have noticed this in your field, like in some ways it's elemental, but like sometimes it takes you years and years of doing something to be like, oh, like, why don't we just switch these two pieces? And so my thing was like, let's start with damages, right? We'll get to whether you have a case. And that's obviously an important piece of it. But a lot of times, I'll get, and I'm always welcome referrals, but I'll get people call me or I'll get cases referred to me. And I'm like, there's just no damages here. Like, even if I can prove, that there's a violation of the law, like the juice is just not worth the squeeze on this one. So that's part of it. It's like explaining that concept to people, and because we get people all the time who, bad stuff has happened to them at work, and they'll come and I'll be like, yeah, this is bad stuff that happened. It may even be illegal, but like, we can go all the way through a federal trial and you're going to get max $30,000. We're going to make $200.
You got a raise. So,
right.
It's funny you say that. I was last week at a presentation, a med-mal plaintiff's lawyer. He was going through how he evaluates a case and damages. First thing, he's like, it's got to be big damages.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think a lot of people are surprised by that. They'll come in and they think they're going to be big emotional distress damages. And I'm like, that's, yes, there are some damages here. But again, getting back to the legal leverage portion of it, like if what you want is to negotiate a, 10% better severance, yeah, you got some leverage here, right? Because the employer wants to avoid this. There is some smoke here, maybe some fire, so you've got some leverage. If you want a 10%, better severance, we can do that because you've got some damages. If you want $100,000 or more, like you just don't have the leverage for that because the other side's, knowledgeable employment attorney is going to do the same thing I did and be like, hey, we'd love to get rid of this, but you've got $30,000 in damages. So that is to try to, the whole course is designed to, and again, for a lawyer, it'd be fairly elemental, but it's like, let's start with the damages. Let's figure that out. Let's look at the liability of your case. And of course, you're not going to be an attorney, the person who's reading it, who's a layperson, but I try to walk them through, kind of broad strokes, how an attorney would look at this. And then, just, provide a weighted average, based on everything you know about your case, do you have emails? Do you have documents? How strong are your witnesses? Scale of 1 to 10, how would you evaluate your case? Again, always it's in the book, it's in the course. Like, it's always better to talk to an attorney. That's where you're going to get the real rub. But like, a smart person could do this. Is it 6 out of 10? Is it 8 out of 10? And then take that and multiply it toward, to the value, the damages that you've calculated. And so, if you've got $100,000 worth of damages and 80%, on liability, then you've got an $80,000 case. And then helping people understand that, you generally are not going to get that 80,000 unless you push way into the process, right? So and if you want, that's great, but know that from the outset. Whereas if you want 30,000, well, you can probably get that a lot quicker. And what is, there's no right or wrong answer to this, but what is the value of your time, your money? Like, if you could get $30,000 now, would you rather have that, or would you rather wait for 2 years and full tilt litigation to get double that? And some people, they're willing to do that, but that's what the legal leverage program.
So it's like a video course for basically potential clients out there. So how do you deliver it? Do they have to sign up for it? How do they find it? How do they sign up for it?
Yeah. So our clients get it for free. We give them, they get the access code. And then for people who want to purchase it, and I forget what we priced it at, but it's just on the website. They go, you enter your email, and, you get, I think that you get some, it's been a while since I've looked at the marketing follow-up on that, but I think you get some snippets of what the videos are like. And there's also a workbook that comes with it. And so then you enter your email, there's an invoice sent. If you want to buy it, then you buy it. And then we also have a Facebook group associated with it, because that's the other piece, right? For employment law, probably for all legal issues, but certainly for employment law, it can be very isolating, right? Like, you are on your own dealing with this yes, you've got your attorney, but you don't really have a community. Yeah, there are some attorney-client issues. I mean, that, something we have to be dealt with, but with the Facebook group, it can be anonymous. So people can post there anonymously and ask questions or share their stories. And so the idea is, to give people some sense of their options, even if they don't hire an attorney. And obviously that's the best way to go. But even if they don't hire an attorney, because a lot of people, right, they can do their own demand letter. They can take the first swing at it on their own if they're willing to do that, and to help them through that situation. And then for people who are going further, and litigating or working with an attorney, giving them that support and the knowledge they need to be an educated consumer.
So that's pretty cool. So you're probably you're not getting rich off of it, but it is a revenue stream, number one. And maybe more importantly, it's almost like a pre-screening. It probably takes a little load off your intake, probably.
Yeah.
They sort of pre-screen themselves. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit. So, your firm, you said you've got like 42 people now. I assume, you tell me, but I assume you're sort of in the CEO role now. Do you do any legal work anymore?
Nope.
Okay. In the CEO role, obviously you do marketing, because I see everything. What about sales? And by sales, I mean, you're in the consult room when somebody calls in. Do you do that anymore?
Nope.
So okay, this is awesome. So how did you move? That's the question. How did you move to where you are now?
Yeah.
Is it mindset? How did you get the pieces in place? How did you get there, and how long did it take?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so after I worked with Lee, and so Lee at the time would only work with you for 14 months. And so, because his thing was like, after 14 months, you'll no longer be scared of me. You're just going to tell me what I want to hear. I'm not going to be of use to you. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I worked with him for that 14 months and then stopped. And then I think it was and I think this is one of the things you had a question about, but I went to Strategic Coach, which was another coaching group. It's a non-attorney coaching group run by a guy named, he doesn't do much of his own coaching anymore, but Dan Sullivan, who's just fantastic. I don't know if you're familiar with him. But
I am. Yeah. And I know Strategic Coach. I have not done it, but I do want to get into that. I'm very curious about the program and what you got out of it.
Yeah, it was I did it for 3 years and loved it. And, I would go back to that one eventually. I think I learned a lot of kind of the not high level, but like entrepreneurial ideas there first. Like really, Lee had turned me on to some of it, like the delegation, the packaging of your intellectual property, kind of how to think about, and it was also great to just be in a room with a bunch of other entrepreneurs, most of whom were not lawyers. So it was interesting to get the perspective from other fields. So I did that for 3 years, again, which I thought was fantastic. But I felt like, which ended up being true, I needed more of kind of a tactical, nuts and bolts, like how does it work in a law firm? Because you're not going to get that necessarily as a strategic coach. It's going to be a higher level kind of training. So then I joined How to Manage a Small Law Firm. And that is where I really, I was already primed by strategic coach. So I was a step ahead in the sense of the way, some of the concepts they would talk about. Like, I think for a lot of attorneys in the room, it was the first time they had heard them. It was not the first time I had heard them. I'm like, I'm all in. Just tell me how, right? Tell me the nuts and bolts. And also, I mean, just being with a group of people who had a similar objective, which was to build, for me anyway, to build an organization that could run without you having to steer, right? Be there and steering the wheel the whole time. Another great book on the topic, which also a great podcast, Built to Sell. Love that book and love that podcast. But anyway, so to get to your question, probably the first big leap for me, I mean, so I was already, hold on, I got to plug my computer in real quick. I didn't realize it wasn't plugged in. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no
I got the notification it was about to die, and I'm like, why is it? And I saw the plugs in here. So we'll start over. So one of the big things for me was, because I was already had associates. I was already delegating, a lot of the work down to them. And just a quick aside on that, the first time I even thought about that possibility, I remember I was with one of my early callers with Lee Rosen, and I was talking to him, and I'm like, hey, he was just kind of asking me like why I reached out to him. And I'm like, well, I got all these things I want to do and all this marketing, and I can't seem to get it done. And he's like, well, why not? And I'm like, well, I got all these clients, I got all these kids. And he's like, well, you've got attorneys working with you, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, have them do the work. And I was just like dumbfounded. I'm like, you can do that? He's like, yeah, that's how you grow any business. Like, you have somebody else like do the production while you go out and grow the business. And so I immediately went back and was like, you're managing attorney, you two are reporting to him, which went about as well as you might imagine something like that would go. It was it wasn't quite a disaster, but let me say I had to clean up a lot of messes.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, and again, I learned this as a strategic coach, you got to delegate, not abdicate. And I was just like, here, you guys go have fun with this, and I'm going to go market and sell and do all that kind of stuff. And it took me years to get to the point where I wasn't doing most of the legal work. But the big piece for me with How to Manage, which was kind of mind-blowing for me at the time, is like hiring non-attorney salespeople, which was not even something I would never have come to that on my own. And I just couldn't wrap my head around how to do that. And he had Arjan Robbins, who's the one who started How to Manage. It was already pretty sizable when I got there. And he had a course called How to Train Your Dragon, right? Named after the movie. And it was, as it sounded, it was like how they called them dragons, the sales, the people who would do sales. And it was how to train them to sell legal services. And so it was to train non-attorney salespeople, but you could, as the attorney, go through the program yourself. And so that's what I did. I signed up for, because I'm like, how does this even happen? And I went through the program, and I was like, after I finished it, I'm like, I'm not sure how I managed to sell legal services at all to this point, like, because you realize there is an art to it. And I think most entrepreneurs, certainly people who start their own businesses, are naturally good at it to a certain extent. So I'm being a little bit facetious, but about realizing that there's an art to it that can be learned, and that a good bit of it does not only does it not require an attorney, but an attorney will often muck it up. Right? Because an attorney, what they said in How to Manage, like, you always want to take them to the sausage factory. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to file this. And some of that is good, right? It develops trust with the client, but it doesn't address what their issues are, right? I mean, if you start, as I did after that, started reading, reading books on sales, like they say, sell the sizzle, not the steak, right? Like you got to talk to them where they are and what their ambitions are. And so I came back, and still then I was doing a decent amount. Well, let me back up. I had my other attorneys doing the initial consults, and I was still doing some. So we were all sort of doing the consults. And when I went through the sales training, I had no idea there was something called a conversion rate. I didn't even know what that meant. And they set me down, and they're like, well, your conversion rate is you get so many potential clients that are coming in. So many of them are converted to clients. Like, what's that percentage? And it was terrible. Like when I actually calculated it, was like 14%.
Oh, wow.
And, it was awful.
Wow.
It was awful. And that's just because it wasn't the attorneys were great attorneys. They just weren't, that's not what they were. And some of them were better than others. Some of them were quite good. And some of them were, just, you might as well be throwing those leads into a black hole just because that was just not their skill set to convert them. And that was a big piece for me too, because again, I think a lot of issues, and I got this from somebody else, in any small business really come down to simple math, right? If you can do the simple math, you can figure it out. And once I sat down, because before then I had been like, I need to market more, website, more leads. And when they were like, look, if you can change your conversion rate from 14% to just 25%, like look what this does with your revenue without doing anything else in marketing. So I came back and I'm like, all you guys just go back to pricing law. And I did all the consults for, I don't remember how long, a number of months. I don't know if it was a full year. And then started hiring non-attorney salespeople. And it took me a while, kind of work out the kinks with that. But that was probably those two things. I'd gotten better at delegating the legal work, and I was still doing some of it, mostly the higher level stuff, and occasionally taking a client here or there. But then the other big piece was getting out of the sales process. So that was the first time where once I got those pieces in place, where clients would come in, they would be worked up, cases would be resolved, and they would be closed out. And I wouldn't have any idea. Like I wouldn't, if you said, what about the Smith case?
That is awesome. That's awesome. Right.
Right.
It's, the use of non-attorney salespeople. I've heard of some other firms doing this, but it's probably easier in a consumer-facing practice than
I think that's true.
Business sort of facing. But man, I mean that's usually one of the last pieces. Is this the founder has always been good at marketing and sales, and it's the last piece that they get rid of. It seems like often.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I have some friends who, are more kind of B2B, I have some friends who are in the white collar criminal defense world. And I think that's trickier. I think it can be done, right? I think you just there are attorneys, right, who are salespeople. That's what they do, and so you can have somebody with the JD, who can speak at that level, who's almost more of a business development person, not just necessarily a sales person. So I do think there are some differences, but yeah, that was the biggest change for me in kind of getting myself out of the day-to-day of the business. So yeah.
So another question that is always of interest to me as I'm growing my firm and as you continue to grow yours, as CEO, part of your job is allocation of resources. So, any business, you've got limited resources, time, energy, money, and you've got more ideas and more initiatives than you could ever do. So how do you, Tom, figure out, okay, this is what we're going to do? What's your process of sort of going through that and figuring out, okay, we've got this much time, energy, money, we're going to do this now and we'll save the others for later?
Yeah, a couple of things. Probably so after the sales piece, the next big thing that allowed me to kind of jump forward was hiring a COO. And I, again, got that from How to Manage. I would not have come to this on my own. But I was, kind of in that program, at least at the time. They were like, look, once you get around 1.5 million in revenue, your firm is going to get too big for you to keep your arms around it, and you're going to need, just like there are people who are really good at sales and perhaps better than you are at sales, there are people who are really good at managing resources, perhaps better than you are at managing resources, and you should hire them. And so I did that, but it wasn't with some reluctance on my part, because it was my first, except for some of the attorneys. It was my first 6-figure hire. It was a big deal. And I was trying to do it on the cheap. I was trying to promote a paralegal, and I don't know if you know how HTM works, but they have kind of their fractional program. You have a fractional CEO. And my CEO at the time, he was just a great guy, was like, don't be like, he's like, just don't be stupid. Like, no, don't promote your paralegal. Like, you put on your big boy pants and hire somebody who you can do this right out of the job. And perhaps not strangely, my wife was a huge advocate of this because of my many skill sets, reading a spreadsheet and figuring out how to, like you say, how to allocate those resources. It's just not I could do a B- job, but that's not where my head lives. And so so now I'm not even the CEO. So my CEO now is named Brian Formigos. He started out at my COO. And in some ways I got lucky because you'll hear people who hire COO and have nightmare stories, just like any hire, right? But I kind of got lucky right out of the gate. And Brian had maybe decades, I'm sure, management experience in downtown DC firms. And he had just kind of gotten burnt out of the big firm, pre-pandemic, throw on your suit, jump on the metro, head into town every day. And so I kind of caught him on the rebound. He was looking for something else, and it was phenomenal. And it really, when he stepped in, honestly, I don't know that the firm would have survived if he hadn't come in, because so I had the non-attorney salespeople, everything was going great, but you've heard the phrase growing gone. I was headed to growing gone, because we were bringing in more clients, record-breaking revenue every month, spending just like it was all going out the back end, and some months more than it was bringing in. And I'm not the greatest at math, but I do know if you spend more than you're making, that's not a recipe for longevity. So he came in and he was great. I mean, he's like, we need to reset your comp system. We got to change, just really pull all these levers. And so he was the next big step. So that really helped us take off, because he took off my plate some things that I was not particularly good at. So he was COO for a number of years, and then I promoted him to CEO about a year ago. So I'm really practically useless. So I'm glad you gave me something to do to be here talking to you.
So what are you, your chairman? Is that your title?
That's right. Grand Poobah. But I'll tell you another thing that we did, I'm sure you're familiar with, is we use the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I don't know if you guys do that, but I had been a fan, which again, I learned about through the Strategic Coach, which is where I first heard of it, the book Traction, and read it and was like, this is what we need to do. And we tried to implement it on our own for a number of years and did not, sort of a 30% job. And then we eventually okay, we need to hire a consultant. So we hired one of their implementers through their EOS website. And for 2 years, we did that. And that was another big piece. So in addition to bringing on Brian, they really helped us bring our management team together, really helped us bring some discipline, to our management process, because I think this is true of a lot of entrepreneurs. You're probably the same way. I'm a quick start. I want to try this. I want to try that. Which is good and bad, right? It gets a lot of initiatives out there, but a lot of them are smoking heaps off in the corner because you got bored or you weren't good at implementing it. So just
you're describing me to a T.
Yeah. So
it frustrates your team, I'm sure. I know it frustrates mine. It's just like boom, boom, boom.
Right. Well, that was the great thing about EOS is they get that. They're right. They were like, in a nice way, they're like, look, we get it. He's crazy, right? You got he's crazy. He's going to come in here and he's going to go boom. And you guys have got to, and particularly with Brian, be like, okay, let Tom have his whiteboard moment, and then we're going to pick a couple of these ideas and work with the team. And, it's sort of elemental, but it's hard discipline to learn, which was, come up with your rocks or your objectives that you want to accomplish within these 90 days. And you do this all in one day, right? Or maybe two. And then that's it, right? You don't go back and say oh, I'm going to do this. No, you have picked your objectives, all these great ideas. You can put them in the parking lot and we can talk about them for the next quarter. But Tom doesn't get any more ideas in these 90 days. We're just executing on those. And it took us a while. It took us a number of months. It really took us about 2 years. But that process got a lot better. And then the whole group learned it. So not only, and this kind of happened over a number of years, but so I had Brian as my COO, and then we hired a director of sales, director of marketing, and a managing attorney. So we had a whole C-suite, and the EOS process really helped with that discipline, to your question about, okay, we got these resources, how do we allocate them? Because I just that was not my strong suit.
So you've got the EOS system. If you're willing to share, or however much you're willing to share, what's
Sure.
the long term, or what's your 10-year vision for the firm?
Yeah, so we want to, continue to be, to stay in our niche, right? To stay in employment law, representing individuals, and to continue to expand out into this market. The 10-year goal is to be at 30 million in revenue. I think I forget we've got this all out on our EOS. They have you lay it out, your vision, and I forget how many employees. I think we had in 10 years 100 and some employees. With AI, frankly, I don't know if that's going to be necessary, but we'll see. But that's the 10-year goal.
So it sounds like you've sort of found your sweet spot. You get to do the things that you're good at and that you enjoy. What do they call that? Your I don't know. There's some word
unique
for it.
ability.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like things are pretty good. Is that?
Yeah, things are good. Yeah, life is good. I'm certainly happier now than I ever have been. And you've experienced this. I think any entrepreneur has. Like there have definitely been some dark, and I think if you're trying to grow that way, that's just going to happen, right? Like you just got to learn some things in the school of hard knocks. But I wouldn't trade it. I'm glad that and really, frankly, sometimes I kept going just because I didn't know of a better option than to just keeping on. I wish I could say it was some, great bravery on my part, but it really wasn't. But I'm glad that I, that for whatever reason, stuck through those times and learned those lessons, because it's entirely possible, I think, in any business. And again, not all attorneys want to do this, and that's fine. If you want to keep your hands in the production, and some managing attorney loves trying cases, like he's like, I don't think he wouldn't want my life. He wants to stay, which is great. And I think attorneys can certainly do this, but it is also possible to develop an organization, even a professional services organization, that just runs without you having to steer it.
So you've had a nice career arc from a solo with no business to, you've sort of retired I say retire, but you've moved to the chairman role, get to do, your sweet spot there. For the others out there that are thinking about starting their firm, or maybe the early stages, is there any advice that you would give them, things you wish you had known way back then when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, if you've got that itch, then you should just do it. Right. It's entirely possible. And I think what I wish I had known is that it's not easy, but it is not conceptually difficult to build a firm that will support you in whatever fashion that you want. And I have seen people, for me, it was years and years of kind of, grinding away, learning some things here or there. But I've seen people who, using the same knowledge that I wish I had when I had started, which is much more available now than it was in 2009. But I've seen people start with How to Manage or with another coaching group. And it's not that there aren't hard times. Within a matter of a couple of years, they've got a pretty decent firm that's continuing to grow. So I think get out there and learn. Understand it's going to be hard. That's just part of the way it is. Hard and fun, exhilarating, and all those things. But get out there and learn it. Right? Learn how to do the sales, learn how to reach your P&L, learn how to market your practice. And then I think the other piece is there's almost any practice area, any business, anywhere you can make it successful, right? I think when I started, I had a little bit of a lack mentality, like there wasn't enough out there, so I was constantly reaching and grabbing for more. And it doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but if you want to be the T-bone car crash guy, you can do that. It might take a little bit, but there are enough T-bone car crashes out there for you to do it. And in any market, I remember, this is not my practice, but I remember meeting with a guy who was just starting out his practice in the DC area. He was starting out in personal injury, and he had some experience, good attorney. And I remember talking to him, and he wasn't spending a lot on digital marketing, and he didn't have much of a website. And I was like, and I don't do personal injury, I don't know, but I'm like, I think it's pretty competitive. I think you're going to need to spend some more on that. And I was wrong. That guy grew his practice pretty steadily by doing networking. He would have 2 lunches with people, and he was a good attorney. So it wasn't just that. He was doing a great job with the cases that he got, but he was having 2 lunches religiously. I mean, I could tell. Like, I would come up on his Rolodex every now and then, like, he'd call me back up, to go get lunch. And he's now got a thriving practice. And of course, now he does the PPC, he does the website. But that's just an example of this was somebody who started out with no resources, without a ton of experience, who just kind of in a pick and shovel fashion built himself a thriving personal injury law firm in an area where there are a lot of personal injury lawyers. So I think that's another thing I would like to have known too, is like, pick what you want and stick at it. There are enough people out there to make you a success that need your services.
That's something that, part of my practice representing law firms, one of the cool things is that you get to see, or I get to see, so many different types of practices that are kicking ass. There's low volume, high volume, plaintiff side, defense side, this weird little niche over here that nobody's ever heard of. And then there's this thing over here, and people are doing it. They're figuring it out. It's just like you said. I think another key is you need to do something that at least, I don't really like the word passion, but it's something that at least is going to hold your interest. It's got to be interesting to you, or else you're going to hate it.
Great point. And I'll tell you, just going back to my early days. So because I was coming out of the, U.S. Attorney's office. So like one of the obvious things for me to do was do criminal defense. And I was working with this is not Lee, but with a coach at the time who's like, well, start with that because that's what you know. And you can add other practices later. And I think that's not necessarily bad advice. But to your point, like I didn't have the passion. Like I could do it. And I actually liked my clients quite a bit, but like I wasn't interested enough to be able to sit down and write about it every day and think about it. And that's really what helped me pick employment law, because that was an area that, like you said, I don't think you necessarily have to be, kind of bleeding heart, like you love. And it's okay if you are, like, great. Some people have that really kind of passion for, a particular area. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but you have to have enough, as you say, enough in the tank that you're willing to come back every day and chip away and write about, or get out there and network on whatever topic that it is. So I do think that it's got to have, and I got this from Arjan Robbins. He's like, there's a number of different ways you can love your practice. You can love your clients, right? You can love the law, and you can love the business model. And it doesn't have to be all three. Like it could be just one of those. Maybe you just love the clients. Maybe you just love that area of the law. Maybe you love, that business model. Like you said, maybe you like doing kind of the, high volume, and that turns you on, and you love tearing down your practices, building it back up, and thinking about it. So there are a lot of ways to be successful, but it's got to be something that you've got the endurance for.
Yeah, I like that. So I know I've kept you here for a while. Why don't you tell everybody if they want to get in touch with you and buy your book or whatever, how can they find you?
Yeah, sure. You can find me, find our website, so spigglelaw.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Always happy to connect to people there. We do have a new book out called Fired or Afraid That You Might Be. That is now up on Amazon, so you can go there and get you a hard copy. I forget what the hard copy is. The Kindle version's like $1, so you can go get our book for $1 there. And you can also find the book on our website.
And I'll say, I like your post on LinkedIn. You drop some good wisdom on there, so keep doing that. I get a lot out of that. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Well, it's been fun.
Yeah,
thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.yourlawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.